to know about the tests is, are they valid? And we hear about how, because these tests are very important, they're used for promotion in some states, they're used to determine if the child moves forward or if they need to go into intervention services. They are used to determine whether or not teachers are evaluated. Here in New York, your governor recently said, well, we won't really, we'll have a panel to talk about not using them for teacher evaluation for a few years. That's not never. We want to see if we can quiet the opposition. So if we're going to use these tests for high stakes, in other words, there's going to be a consequence, we need to know that they're valid. What does valid mean? Valid means that it's testing what it says it's testing and nothing else. I can step on my bathroom scale every day, and every day I get on my bathroom scale and it says 110, and I say, yippee skip. And then I go to the doctor's and I step on his scale that has the real weights, and it doesn't say that number. My scale wasn't valid because it didn't correctly measure. It didn't measure what it said it was going to measure, which was my weight. So are these tests valid? We're going to skip that. One of the things that happens in the testing is kids walk into the classrooms. We don't know if that child was sick. We don't know if their dog died last night. We don't know if their parents are in the middle of a divorce. We don't know if they didn't get breakfast. So they take the test, and we get a score back. But nobody knows for any given score, what are we measuring? There was a teacher right here in Rochester who was at a public event and stood up and talked about how one of the children in her classroom had seen her mother shot on the front porch of her home in a drive-by drug-related shooting. The mother was not involved in the drugs, she was just a drive-by. And you expect that little girl to take a test and think it's going to mean anything after watching her mother die in front of her on the front porch of her home? But you don't know which kids they are. So when you look at that score, is it really their math score? Or did you just measure the fact that their dog died last night? Now, in any given testing population, about 10% of the kids will have one of those extra factors, except when children live in poverty. As the socioeconomic level of the children goes down, that extraneous factor goes up because children who live in poverty are more likely to have an undiagnosed illness or didn't get breakfast or maybe dinner or didn't get sleep the night before or had upheaval in their family. So we are testing poverty, not achievement. Now, is that just my opinion? No. This document, Incentives and Test-Based Accountability, is actually from the National Research Council, which is part of the National Academies Press. It's out of Washington, D.C. It's one of the federal think tanks. And they talk about tests. And what they say is test scores will differ from one occasion to another, even though the test taker's proficiency didn't change, because of the questions, because of any testing content, and because of the test taker. So these tests should not be considered true scores. They should be considered estimates. In other words, it's one measurement among many, and we should consider it as one measurement among many. And we've always known that. This is not new information. Similarly, the National Assessment for Educational Progress, which is a congressionally mandated test given across the country, says when you interpret these, you need to take into consideration the socioeconomic and educational factors that can impact performance. We've always known that these tests are not valid. We've always known in educational testing experts that these tests don't really measure achievement necessarily. And you've always known it too. Remember when you or your children took the SATs? How many scores did you have to send to the college? At least 2. You had to send every college at least 2 scores. Why? Because one might be a fluke. They knew these are not actual measurements. They're indicators. And yet in this system, we treat that state assessment as if it's made of gold. We talked about the connection with poverty. This is actually from the USA Today, and what they say is they talked about all of the international tests and how American students did so poorly, especially as compared to Finland, which does very well. But the article says only 5% of the children in Finland live in poverty. So what these 2 researchers from Columbia University did was they went through the test results and they removed any American district with a poverty level of more than 20%. So that still cuts in Finland's favor. We were first in the world. because socioeconomic level matters. Here in New York, your state Department of Education actually mapped in 2014 the correlation between the test scores and poverty. The little red dots, that's the poverty level, the achievement level, the poverty level of the district. Here's the achievement level of the kids. As the poverty level grew, achievement dropped. And it's almost an exact correlation. This is English language arts. They did the same thing for math. In math, not quite as close of a correlation because you see a lot of the red dots at the top, because math is not something that you necessarily bring from your home because you learn it in school. So math is more closely tied off into intellectual development than cultural factors. But the correlation was still more than 30%. So these tests test and then punish poverty. Yet we want to close the achievement gap. The tests are what are called criterion reference tests. And if